Welcome back, Defenders. Jake here. To absolutely no one's surprise, Vladimir Putin announces his 2024 re-election bid. Now, Putin was supposed to announce in a couple days on December 14th, but Putin knows that his military is incompetent, and they're not going to be able to capture Avdiivka by December 14th. The Russians began assaulting this city on October 10th, and they've been sustaining almost 1,000 casualties a day, trying to take this city before Putin announced his re-election, so Putin had something positive to talk about. The Russians aren't even in the city of Avdiivka yet, so Putin is moving the goalpost, and he's now telling his military to capture Avdiivka prior to the March election. 3 more months of direct assaults just to capture a suburb of Donetsk with a pre-war population of 32,000 people. So here's the moment when Putin announced to his people that he would be running for a 5th term in office.
Вы так много сделали для нашего Донбасса. Совет Федерации назначил выборы президента Российской Федерации, и я в лице всего нашего народа, всего Донбасса, наших.
This is, of course, pre-rehearsed, pre-planned. This military officer was instructed what to say to immediately come up to Putin and thank him for everything he's done for the people of the Donbass region. So I'm sure if the people of Mariupol were still alive, if the Russians hadn't destroyed the entire city and killed tens of thousands of people, they'd be thanking Putin for everything he's done for the Donbass region. Same with the city of Bakhmut, completely wiped off the map. And I do have to be critical of the Russians. I'm kind of disappointed when Kim Jong-un makes an appearance before his people. They fall to the ground, screaming and crying in fits of joy. Perhaps by Putin's next re-election, he'll have the Russian people properly trained like they are in North Korea. But this is an actual video from a group of Russians who call themselves Putin's Squad. They put out goofy videos on social media, but this is their reaction, celebrating to the news that Putin is running for re-election.
Наша организация очень рада, что мы остаемся в вашей команде вместе с вами.
I want to highlight in this video that this Russian man is wearing a Levi Strauss hoodie. Levi Strauss, of course, is an American clothing company. So Putin Squad only had one job to do: celebrate the dear leader's re-election announcement without promoting that demonic, evil America. And they failed to do so. By Levi Strauss, I guess. And Russia announced that their election in 2024 will be held over 3 days. Why 3 days? Critics argue that extended voting periods make it easier to commit voter fraud, as it becomes harder for monitors and poll workers to do their jobs, ensuring there are no irregularities, and ballot boxes are stored at polling stations overnight. So on day 1 and day 2, you can come vote in the election, and on the night of day 1 and day 2, they'll make sure that incorrect votes are removed from the ballot boxes. Navalny urges supporters to vote for anyone but Putin in the 2024 election. Jailed Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny said Thursday that Russians should vote against Putin. You can do this by voting for any other candidate. Something tells me Putin's going to get 90 to 95% of the vote anyways, so Russia doesn't have free elections anymore. But the people of Russia are upset about this war, mostly the mobilized men. Yes, Russia is still signing contracts. That's their choice. Russia is still conscripting, trying to avoid sending conscripted men to the war zone. But for the mobilized, they've been there for 14 months. Some 300,000 reservists, the ones still alive, were recruited to boost Moscow's troop numbers in Ukraine as part of Putin's partial mobilization drive. This was September of 2022, 14 months ago. And Putin is playing it safe by delaying new rounds of mass mobilization until after his re-election. So come March of next year, Putin's taking off the gloves. He no longer fears demonstrations and riots prior to his re-election. And we get to see the real Putin next March, next April, and how little he cares for the lives of his own people and his own soldiers. We're also going to see what the Russian economy is really made of. Back in August of this year, Putin told the central bank to use their foreign currency reserves to shore up the ruble, to take their yen and yuan and euros and just buy their own currency to prevent it from going above $1 to 100 Russian rubles. Putin can't do this forever. He's basically just lighting his own money on fire by doing this. So after he's reelected, we're going to see what the true value of the ruble is. The ruble is not an internationally traded currency anymore. Nobody wants to hold it. But it's still going to get bad with hyperinflation for their own currency once they can no longer afford to keep propping it up. This is the chart that I like to check every day. This is the price of crude oil that the Russians get out of the Urals. And it's been crashing the last 3 or 4 months. It's currently down to $55 per barrel of oil they export. And the reason why is global demand is falling because central banks are holding elevated interest rates. But global production is just also up. Putin flew to Saudi Arabia to meet with the Saudis because the price of crude for everyone is falling as production output, especially in Canada, the United States, and Brazil, keeps going up. And there's an interesting dynamic here. In my last update video, I showed that clip where Saudi Arabia is contemplating flooding the markets to bankrupt US oil producers, to just flood the market, cause the price of oil to go down to $30 a barrel, hold it for 6 months, and hope that US producers go out of business. But this isn't going to work because the United States has a silver bullet, and that would be the US Strategic Petroleum Reserve. You can see going back to 2021, there was about 638 million barrels of oil in the US Strategic Reserve. These are caverns on the Gulf Coast of Mexico, under Louisiana. And the United States holds this in the event of an emergency. And this was controversial back in 2021 when President Biden started selling oil from the Strategic Reserve at like $120 a barrel. The Strategic Reserve is now down to 351 million barrels, but President Biden has to refill this. So if the Saudis try and flood the market, and the price of oil, this is the price of ICE Brent crude, if this goes down to $60 a barrel, then the United States can just start buying up inventory to refill the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. We sold it at $120, and we're going to buy it back at $60. It's a pretty good deal. So I think Saudi's plan of flooding the markets to bankrupt US producers isn't going to work. Ironically, because, the United States sold all this oil when the price was elevated because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Let's get to the situation report. Stalled U.S. military aid to Kyiv is becoming a crisis, a combination of political infighting in the United States and allies who are not living up to their commitments are bad omens for Ukraine. These are not comfortable conversations, but we have to look at ourselves here in the West and how we're failing Ukraine. So here is President Biden once again pleading with Republicans, begging Republicans to do the right thing and approve additional military aid for Ukraine.
Look, I know we have our divisions at home. Let's get past them. This is critical. Petty, partisan, angry politics can't get in the way of our responsibility as a leading nation in the world. The entire world is watching. The entire world is watching. What will the United States do? And think if we don't support Ukraine, what's the rest of the world going to do? What's Japan going to do, which is supporting Ukraine now? What's going to happen in terms of the G7? What's going to happen in terms of our NATO allies? What are they going to do? If we walk away now, it'll only embolden other would-be aggressors. So I'm calling on Congress to do something and do the right thing, to stand with the people of Ukraine, stand against the tyranny of Putin, stand for freedom, literally stand for freedom. Let's get this done.
And as Senate Republicans have turned on Ukraine in the last week, the Russians are taking a victory lap. Here's another clip from Julia Davis at Russian Media Monitor. Russian state TV is pleased with Republicans for blocking aid to Ukraine. So let me read for you what the Russians are saying about what the Republican Party here in the United States has done. Let me remind you that the deal about additional aid has collapsed because of border issues. It looks like Democrat Chuck Schumer is still trying to push it through, but it's not happening because Republicans are presenting harsh demands. Without a decision about the borders, even Republican Mitch McConnell won't vote for this deal. None of the Republicans will vote for it. That is very good. This is Olga chiming in. This is where this issue is being decided. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin is already saying it's a strategic mistake. A conflict is unfolding there. The Biden administration has big problems. If this story continues until the elections, or if it doesn't end in a palatable manner, otherwise he, Joe Biden, will lose his electorate. It's even gotten to the point where they're offering up Liz Cheney. So these are the Russians celebrating that if Republicans in the United States just abandon Ukraine and the situation with the war gets worse, this will make Joe Biden look bad. And then the Republicans perhaps can perform better in the November 2024 elections. Olga chimes in, "You're saying it as though we're supposed to pity him, Joe Biden. I say it as it is." This is this man right here speaking. "Don't try to talk us into it. We'll have no pity for Joe Biden. To the contrary, we're ready to hammer the final nail right in. We'll see how Republicans treat these nails. We'll see. First, we should think it through all the way." So this Russian commentator is actually trying to be cautious here, while Olga cannot contain her excitement. First, we should think it through all the way. As of now, well done, Republicans. They're standing firm. That's good for us. Even Mitch McConnell, well done, Gramps. So I'm actually going to play the audio so you can hear this for yourself.
Они пока молодцы, республиканцы. Держатся, нас устраивают.
Они держатся.
И даже МакКоннелл, молодец, старикан.
Они держатся, потому что у них внутренние проблемы.
So that's the Russians on Kremlin State TV thanking the Republican Party. They're standing firm because their internal problems are more important to them. If you can cause internal economic problems, then you can win. If you can't cause economic problems, you can't win. As an American, this is shameful. This is embarrassing to see the Russians taking a victory lap, that the Republican Party is helping them win this war. Here's a poll. Nearly 50% of Republicans think the U.S. provides too much aid to Ukraine. Yes, of course, elected representatives listen to their constituents, but constituents also look to their leaders for what to think on complicated issues. So as more and more Republicans speak negative about Ukraine, are critical of Ukraine, are supportive of Russia, this is influencing how Republican voters think about the war. The data is still there. The majority of Americans still support Ukraine, but it's weakening as Senate Republicans like Mitt Romney, Lindsey Graham, Mitch McConnell continue this path of trying to tie comprehensive immigration reform to a single vote that needs to happen this month when the problem hasn't been solved in 40 years. This is a setup. So the Washington Post published a very important article with a very detailed investigation of U.S. aid to Ukraine. Most of the money allocated to Ukraine stays in the United States. Out of the $68 billion in military and related assistance, almost 90% has remained in the United States as public procurement for American companies and workers' salaries. Here's Secretary of State Blinken saying 90% of military aid to Ukraine is spent here in the United States, generating economic activity, paying good salaries at good companies, and generating tax revenue.
Note on this, and this is more for the American audience. If you look at the investments that we've made in Ukraine's defense to deal with this aggression, 90% of the security assistance we provided has actually been spent here in the United States with our manufacturers, with our production, and that's produced more American jobs, more growth in our own economy. So this has also been a win-win that we need to continue.
So I know on the internet there's a lot of conspiracy talk about the military-industrial complex, but I don't want to hear it anymore. Republicans have a choice. Support Russia or support the American defense industry. Boeing, Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, Huntington Ingalls, Raytheon. This is a no-brainer. Yet Republicans are choosing to support Russia. I understand there's different degrees. You know, you've got Marjorie Taylor Greene on one end of the spectrum and Mitt Romney maybe on the other. But the Republican Party is unified at the moment against helping Ukraine. And this is actually history repeating itself. Here's a post from Max Boot. He's a Washington Post columnist. By abandoning Ukraine, the GOP is returning to its isolationist roots. A majority of Republicans voted against the 1941 Lend-Lease Act to Britain. Thank goodness that in those days, both the Senate and the House were controlled by Democrats. So in 1941, Roosevelt was president. He was a Democrat. The Democrats controlled the House and the Senate. And that's the only reason why the Lend-Lease Act for Great Britain passed. If the Republicans controlled a chamber in 1941, then maybe the Nazis would have successfully have taken Great Britain. The world today would be a very different place if isolationism was embraced. Lessons from history. We can either help Ukraine and show the world that no one can violate international law, or we can appease Putin, give him what he wants, and make the same mistakes that led to World War II. So realistically, if Ukraine cannot rely on their allies, if they cannot predict what level of equipment and aid they will receive over the next year, then Ukraine does not have the resources to go on the offensive. It would be irresponsible to use resources to go on the offensive if those resources are going to dry up in the next month or so. So this is going to be brutal. Another year, potentially. The Republicans can lose their majority in the House next November. Congress can finally pass aid to Ukraine next January. But that's 13 months from now, where Ukraine has to hold the line, and every time the Russians go on the offensive, make them bleed. We need some kind of political or economic collapse in Russia for Ukraine to have a serious chance of ever liberating their territory. This is the honest conversation we now need to have, now that Republicans have turned on Ukraine. Luckily, there's Germany and Chancellor Scholz. Scholz on Ukraine aid. Germany should be prepared to do more when others are faltering. He gave a pretty good speech that I'll link down below, but let me play for you a couple seconds of German.
Aber ich will sagen, es gehört auch zu den Konsequenzen, dass wir in der Lage sind, lange das zu tun, was jetzt notwendig ist. Und das will ich an dieser Stelle mit aller Klarheit sagen. Wir unterstützen die Ukraine weiter bei ihrem Verteidigungskampf.
I'll link the whole speech down below. I just want to thank Chancellor Scholz and the German people. They announced another military aid package, including vehicles and artillery shells, and Germany's doing what they can. Number of deserting Russian troops surges. The Russians are still the Russians. They're pretty incompetent. With no end to the war or likelihood of release from service in sight, the number of Russian soldiers seeking a way out has increased sharply over the last few months. Winter in this part of the world is pretty brutal, so if you're a Russian soldier who's been stuck in the war zone for 14 months straight, and you're thinking about surrendering or deserting, now would be a good time. Here's a video I'll link down below. I'm not going to play it. This Russian soldier isn't dead. He's not injured, so YouTube censors, please be kind. But a Ukrainian drone captured this Russian soldier with a spoon eating snow. He looks pretty emaciated. He doesn't have proper shelter. This man is freezing, sleeping outside in the cold of winter in Ukraine. And my guess is he doesn't have food. So he's gingerly shoveling snow into his mouth to feel something. This is tragic. It's tragic for these men, but they have a way out. This is what it looks like to be a Russian prisoner of war in Ukrainian custody. Clean clothes, 3 meals a day. You get games. You get your own bed somewhere warm. I think you can even watch TV. They've even got a football to play sports. I don't get it. I don't get why they keep doing this. This is bad news. World Olympic Body clears Russian athletes to compete in the Paris Olympic Games as neutrals. They can't fly their flag, but the athletes can still compete. There's going to be trouble in Paris. The majority of these Russian athletes are also military officers. They are propaganda pieces for the Putin regime. So they're going to show up, and there's going to be fights, there's going to be arguments. If ordinary Russians are allowed to come to the games in attendance, yeah, this is going to be a distraction for Paris. This was the wrong move to allow them. The goal of the Olympics is peace among nations, compete and sport with each other, not war. Russia is in violation of what the Olympics is supposed to stand for by attacking their neighbor and trying to steal their land. This is good news. Bulgarian parliament overrides presidential veto to approve more military aid to Ukraine. So it looks like over 100 previously written off Soviet-era vehicles were donated to Ukraine. The president tried to block it, but their parliament overrode him. These vehicles are not in great shape, but if Ukraine can salvage them for parts or fix them up, then Every little bit counts, so thank you so much to the people of Bulgaria. This is a crazy headline. South Korea indirectly supplied more 155mm shells for Ukraine than all European countries combined. South Korean law prohibits providing weapons to war zones, but the US persuaded Seoul to provide them with munitions, estimating that about 330,000 155mm shells were transferred from Korea. So South Korea has been giving these shells to the United States, not asking what we do with them. We then have been sending these shells to Ukraine. So thank you so much to the people of South Korea. Hopefully you guys know how to build a lot of shells really fast and you can replenish your own stockpiles, but at the same time, how is this possible that South Korea can produce more artillery shells than all of Europe combined? That's a scratch your head moment right there. And on the other side of the peninsula, it looks like the Russians got more than they bargained for doing business with the North Koreans. Russian military bloggers have been complaining about the quality of the 1 million artillery shells they got from North Korea. The Russians, in return, gave the North Koreans their own spy satellite, but a lot of these artillery shells coming from North Korea are trash, inconsistently made, causing detonations in the barrels of Russia's artillery guns. Because of the charges being inconsistent, when you fire one shot, the next one, based on the powder inside, will go a different distance. So the accuracy of Russian artillery has diminished by using North Korean shells. So thank you, North Korea. Final two clips I have for you. The first one is Ukrainian defenders sharing their morning coffee.
Чашечка? Чашечка?
Надо съедать картошку.
Давай. Чашечку, бля.
Кружечку чи чашечку?
Горнетку, бля.
Горнетку. Давай.
Пан начальник зараз буде п'яти, бля. Ні, бере ще.
Так хватит мені, я п'ю так літрами.
Another busy day of beating back the Russians. Definitely starts well when you have your coffee. Final clip I have for you is from Maria Avdiva, a journalist in Kharkiv. She visited Kyiv and was able to see the Lavra bell tower.
Hello from snowy and cold Kyiv, and I am now for the first time here in the great bell tower of Lavra. It was just opened for visiting. It has a huge bell over there which rings every morning, and from here you can see how beautiful Kyiv is, how beautiful Lavra is, and this is why you another time realize why people here are fighting for Ukraine, for this heritage, for this culture, for this country. Thank you for standing with Ukraine. Slava Ukraini.
That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.